One of the things I haven't covered on the channel really is the modding scene when it comes to AI War 2. There are several mods that are pretty sizable that are out there, and there's more people working on them. Some people just like to mod it for their own enjoyment of their own game and don't actually publish it. But have you tried any of those? And if you have, what do you think of the current mods available?
Surprisingly, no, I haven't actually tried any of the mods. Mostly it's because whenever I submit a bug report, the bugs or the game should be in a vanilla state, like no mods. This will make it easier on the developers' lives when they have to search for whatever bug's happening. So that's why I'm sticking to vanilla for now. When the game is like nearly finished, then I might switch to doing some mods. So I've heard amazing things about the civilian industry mods from Star Kelp, and I know there's a Galactic Conquest mod from Sir Limbo, I believe his name. So I'm interested in trying those mods out when I'm no longer doing bug reports. I will definitely give them a rundown and see how well they are.
We talked earlier about your 2-3 method that you use for investing early in the game. But aside from that and the whole synergy issue where you want to have the text that match up with the majority of your ships, is there any particular research that you're automatically going to do every game or ones that you just avoid? What's your strategy on the ones that sort of might be in that other category?
I'd recommend looking into Raid because Raid, not for the strike craft that you can upgrade through it, but rather the outguard. If I get an auto construction minibot outguard, then I will be hands down grabbing that outguard and upgrading Raid solely for that outguard. Because Mark III construction robots are nothing to sneeze at. I've seen them actually snipe a whole Mark III world on their own when they were Mark II, instigator bases as well. Especially with the new turrets. For example, the Ruffian turret, which can shoot away from farther distances as well as harass in general, and the Blitzkrieg turret. The raid turrets now make beachheading viable if you have raid turrets on a battle station. Disruptive tech, I also end up picking usually because they have the pikes turrets that you start out with are upgraded through disruptive, and usually later on in the game I'll pick up a plasma turret or two. So that's also upgraded by disruptive. I enjoy using pike corps as well, so that's all in disruptive tech. Splash tech is another tech that I like picking up from time to time. Aside from all the grenade launcher jokes that I get, yes, 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 grenade launchers are somewhat actually viable to use on attack, especially the Molotovs too, which are a grenade launcher variant. Grenade launchers are good at murdering stacks, as well as stingrays, autocannons, and ablatives, I believe. Splash tech is a very nice investment if you have the appropriate outguards and the appropriate units. Technologist recently got buffed up with the new turrets, as well as the parasites and stingrays. So stingrays got a buff quite recently, and I'm looking for stingrays occasionally. Technologist has some of the best turrets in terms of coolness factor. You have the subverter, which makes zombies, the harmonic, which gets more power from new turrets, and you have the acid, which amplifies damage. You don't see those anywhere else on the other turrets. Regarding techs that I tend to avoid now, the ambush, I honestly don't use ambush too much. Like, I never end up getting vanguards or ambush turrets out of the way. So I don't really tend to upgrade ambush at all, if ever. I just find stuff in ambush to be particularly underwhelming. I don't end up going in there, except for I think raptors are a part of that. Raptors are probably the sole exception. And raptors and velociraptors are very powerful units in their own right due to how fast they are and their range. Subterfuge is also another one that I find lacking, mostly because I just don't get any units that ever line up in Subterfuge in my deck. Regarding hull types, Hull Light is probably the king of all hulls, except for turrets, because I love me my turret hulls. Hull Light is useful for dealing with all different types of strike craft that you will get. For example, V-wings, gunbots, and autocannon mini pods, concussion corps, kites. They're all under the light category. Like, so many things are under light category that I use that I usually end up taking both levels into light at some point into the game. Medium hull tech is another hull tech that I would sometimes pick up, but not that often. It's mostly just if I have like a massive amounts of fusion bombers, then I will enjoy using medium hull tech. Hull heavy is just a tech that I don't pick up at all, mostly because I don't use frigates, and most of the time I don't end up getting vanguards or pulsar tanks. Hull turret, again, my playstyle high IP, that's very critical to have. Max that out at like mid game, hopefully. Cannot stress how important that is. Engineering, that's a tech that I max out all the time. Mark IV engineers, I find to be very important late game because you need to set up infrastructure quickly as fast as you can before the AI can counterattack or do something else. And even early game, I'll pick up that early engineering just so I can keep up the momentum to blitz the AI early on. Mark III engineers or Mark II engineering level gives you cloaked engineers, which is very important because, say, if you're in deep enemy territory and your mobile factory cripples, As long as your engineers aren't discovered, they won't die, and you can repair the mobile factories when you're finished combat. And it's very cheap too. It's only like 2,000 at maximum level. The metal generation tech. I never grab any tech regarding metal generation. Mostly because at high AIP, I end up grabbing enough planets that it doesn't matter what I get. I can always just make up the difference by grabbing more planets. Not only that, I think 4,000 science is a bit on the expensive side for a little bit of extra income. Playing a low AIP game, it might be worth it to take metal generation because metal starving at low AIP games can be a make it or break it situation where if you mess up once, it might take a much longer time to refleet because of your lower amount of planets. Command station techs. I honestly actually never end up upgrading logistics or military command stations through the tech. I upgrade economic stations, however. This is because of my energy constraints. I have to constantly upgrade my energy in order to house the massive amounts of turrets that I bring to the table. Upgrading economic is usually the most cost efficient way that I can do so. Regarding force fields, I'd always recommend picking at least one level into that early game. It gives you an extra force field for your home world and for all other planets as well. Generally, I don't invest more than one level into it, but sometimes I will whenever I have spare science. Force field tech scales pretty rapidly, so I'd recommend going against force field more than twice at most. Upgrading citadels is a very, very niche thing because I personally don't end up grabbing too many citadels or battle stations myself. However, if you tend to have many lying around, then go for it. Citadels and battle stations in their own can be pretty powerful in combat, especially since they don't give AIP on capture. Minefield tech, it exists. I think if minefields and sentries were combined into one tech, then I might invest into it. But as it stands, I don't really upgrade minefields. Sentries, I invest at least 2 levels into usually because some units have an absurd amount of cloaking, and it's very key that you decloak them really quickly, such as macrophage spores or AI raid frigates. So having 2 levels into sentries is very nice when you need to decloak things very quickly.
No, that's something I recently discovered just how important that sentry is in one of my Spire games because stealth guardians were bypassing my choke points along with some other ships. I think that's really good. One difference, perhaps, is that in playing lower AIP, I tend not to have very many economic command stations, if any at all. And I'll usually upgrade logistics station once, and that's about it. Again, that depends on whether I find zenith power generators or not, but a lot of stuff is really playstyle dependent. Really interesting perspective on your approach to that. Okay, so the next one is one of the biggest questions that I get. Again, it's kind of a playstyle question. You've already gone over what you used at the beginning of a game with the classic fleet, but a lot of people, as we've said, get overwhelmed by the number of ships. Are there a handful of them that you like and don't like? I know you've said you don't like ambush, which is kind of funny because I like the snipers. But which ones do you really avoid if you find them in an ARS and then vice versa?
This one's one of those questions where there's no wrong answer kind of thing because of just how much variety there is. Well, except for frigates. Frigates are a wrong answer. Okay, but other than that, with the amount of stuff that you can get from ARSs and the amount of units in the game, it's very difficult to say this is the unit that you must have at all times. However, what I would say definitely is again the classic starting fleet. V-wings, very very strong unit. They're cheap, fast, durable, and they hit hard if they're hitting the right target. And they engine stun so many things. Like they can engine stun your transport too if you're not careful. The fact that they engine stun up to like 20 GX, I believe, is it 20 or 21? I can't remember. Certain dire guardians, they can stun many types of different guardians. They can stun Dark Spire, so on and so forth, right? And anything that they can't stun, you pair with Agravic Pods. Agravic Pods are another ship that I pick up usually. Agravic Pods are a very good anti-heavy kind of guy because most enemy ships have like above 14 engine GX, which is what they have the target bonus against. By using Agravic Pods, which are also part of Disruptive, that synergizes with the Pike turrets I like to grab. Pike turrets, again, or Pike units, my bad. Not just the turrets, like the Pike Corvs as well. Pike Corvettes are very good generalist units because their multiplier against all healthy targets is a universal one. It doesn't matter how small or big the unit is, as long as it has above, like, I think it was 70% health, it'll deal its bonus damage. That's what matters. Many things that are big, like AI Dire Guardians or Golems, they also have, like, above 90mm armor. So they're very nice to have around. Good generalist unit and good specialization as well. Eyebots and Stalkers are another good unit to look out for. They have a multiplier where it's like for every 2,500 energy that a unit has, deal one extra times the damage. So a unit with 2,500 energy takes 1 times damage, but a unit with 5,000 energy takes 2 times the damage, so on and so forth. And many big things like Dire Guardians have like a lot of energy. Golems too, or fortresses and mini fortresses all have that high energy count that you want to look out for, and that's where you can get your damage multipliers on. Dire Posts have 25k energy, and Dire Guardians have 25k energy. That's a 5 times multiplier right there. Other units I'd recommend are, let me think, the Fusion Bomber. The Fusion Bomber is one of those units that is just, in general, very nice to have, just because of its attack multiplier against units with bonus shields, or units with higher shield count, like above 50%, I think, then they deal their bonus damage. So many units have shields. I only think like I can count 7 units that don't have shields at all. They have another one of those universal bonuses like the Pike Corps. Most units, if I remember correctly, I'm not 100% sure. I think they have like a 2-to-1 hull to shield ratio, so you're effectively ignoring 1/3 of the HP of many different units. There are exceptions, of course, like guard posts, which is where fusion bombers shine. Fusion bombers shine at attacking guard posts and turrets, because I believe turret and guard post health to shield ratio is 1-to-5. There's also variants to like the parasitic and the heavy. Although it doesn't matter if it's a fusion bomber, go ahead and grab it. I like them. Concussion corvettes, another unit that I like because of their ability to instantly obliterate stacks of units. They can shut down stingrays or ablatives or autocannons, and they can also snipe away at raptors, which is again another important thing. Raptors are one of those few units that are very good at everything. Even without their bonus, raptors are fast, they're cloaked, and they can hit hard from a far range. Concussion corvettes can strike back, and they have a damage bonus against raptors. That's another unit I'd like to mention, raptors. They're one of the best units that I can think of that are strikecraft based. My only gripe is their upgrade with ambush. So if I end up getting like 3 lines of raptors, then I'll grudgingly add in like maybe 2 levels into ambush. Another unit is the raider and the dagger. They're kind of good in combat, but where they really shine is their speed boost ability. The ability to just boost your speed from like 400 to 1,600 for the raiders or 2,200 for the daggers is insane. You can have fusion bombers zipping around the map, bombing target to target, going from guard post to guard post, hitting them before the guard post can even retaliate. You could have certain ships like gun bots chase down other big targets really quickly and giving them no chance to escape. Or you can give the ability for concussion corvettes who are normally slow and weak to getting up close and personal. They can start kiting everywhere they want to go. So you can constantly have units chasing other units and keep up with units that run away. Probably the space plane. If you use them correctly and saying them to stop to shoot, they can ignore like so much damage on them because of their radar dampening abilities. They should technically be called like defensive bonus or whatever, but we're going to go with classics radar dampening. They shrug off a lot of damage that is as long as the unit is far away from them. And that's important when it comes to units like fortresses or dire guardians. The space planes can effectively neutralize that threat without too much danger. Of course, if you start to bum rush or get careless, then they'll get obliterated. But with careful management, they can be surprisingly effective. And their Mirage, which is a space plane variant, is also very powerful because of how much damage it deals, because it's effectively a fusion bomber and a space plane combined. Holy crap, Mark V Mirages murder everything, inhibiting Tesla. Beforehand, I was big against it because of how long it takes to reload, but when used properly, inhibiting Teslas and Zappers can just straight up murder any amount of ships that are near them. They're like the electric shuttles from a classic, if any of you remember those. And the ability to jam weapons is very important when it comes to reducing DPS. Oh, the Nanoswarm. How could I forget? Nanoswarm is a very powerful unit. It zombifies and it stuns any unit that it hits as long as below mass 2TX, I believe. So it can stun lock entire AI waves. And if you combine that with the regular cluster bomb or auto bomb, well, now you suddenly got an AI wave that returned to sender. It's like a very explosive minigun. So make sure you have the economy to support the nanoswarms. Otherwise, you're going to drain your metal. But when used effectively, nanoswarms are probably one of the most powerful units in the game, and that's why they're so rare. Another unit I'd recommend is the Tritium Sniper Frigate or the Ramifire Frigate. Both these units shoot away at infinite range against targets that have 0.3 albedo. They have a bonus attack against. The bonus damage is quite high, and since it's infinite range, you don't have to do anything. You can just sit them down to auto fire. They'll do their job without having to get in close to personal. And they're quite fast too. Ramifires also deal bonus damage to mass 5TX, so they can plink away at Guardians and Dire Guardians and guard posts. Very important, I find. I don't think any other unit comes to mind that you have to absolutely have. You have to remember that this game is it's very much a free form thing. It's very improvised. You pick up what you find. You don't necessarily will always find it, even though reroll exists. So if you have something bad in your ARS that doesn't sync up with any technologies, you can reroll it. But at the end of the day, it's grab whatever you find to be useful. So it's all up to how you feel about the unit, I think. One more unit that I would recommend grabbing is the Ablative Gatling or Ablative Troll. All cloaked units, I believe, except for engineers, have an albedo of 0.7. So if you really hate cloaked units, Ablative Gatling is the way to go. I guess another unit that I forgot to mention was the gunbots or the autocannon mini pods. Those line up with a generalist tech, and they murder high armor units, which will most often be like a golem or a dire guardian. Just adapt and get a feel for the unit and see if you like it or not.
All right, thank you. I do wonder if there are any that are particularly on your bad list for the strike craft. We know about the frigates, of course, but are there any strike craft other than the ambush that aren't raptors that you personally won't use, or at least won't use very often?
Vanguards. They're tanky, yes, but again, many things like pike, autocannon, tritium sniper, gravity generators, they all counter the Vanguard. And their attack isn't very concentrated. It's kind of like a shotgun weapon that only deals like 90 damage to one target. Multiple shots can't hit one target. They're very, very, very bad against single targets, which is very bad when it comes to hunting like dire guardians or posts or whatever. They're very good for distracting though if you're on defense, so I'll give them that. They can be used as a cheap bulwark. Grenade launcher corvettes, they're not bad by any means, but I wouldn't recommend going out of the way to get them unless you invest heavily into splash.
So, how do you feel about MLRS corvettes?
MLRSs themselves, I find to be kind of on the useless side because again, it's got a similar problem to the Vanguard where it's all damage split, but it doesn't have it as bad. It's a unit I wouldn't go out of the way to get, but if I get it, I won't complain. Unlike the Vanguard, which I would complain.
Well, it's more sort of on the recommended side, but on the Vanguard thing, I had a game recently where I took them, but only because I couldn't get what I would prefer. I like to have a ship that can absorb damage, but for that role, I prefer to have pulsar tanks if I'm going to do it. I've used them a few times. I found them much more useful because at least they feel like they've got more punch than Vanguards in my experience. Other than that, the whole sniper, tripper, etc. group of long range ships. Are there any in that class you think stick out one way or another?
Sentinel gunboats are one of the strongest units I would find, especially since they have infinite range. Their DPS is a bit lacking, yes, but just the utility of infinite range alone and decloaking abilities is very helpful to have, and they can plink away at certain targets. You don't need to set them to chase anything. They can shoot wherever, whenever. Snipers, though, I don't personally recommend picking up snipers, mostly just due to how niche their damage bonus is against fast units. And most of the time in combat, units are going to be sitting still, slugging it out with one another. They could be useful to intercept reinforcements like Warden Fleet. I could see that happening. But other than that, I don't really find myself using them too often, if at all. But still, infinite range is a nice bonus, not gonna lie. Gang Saws. The Gang Saw family is pretty nice when it comes to raw damage, but the fact that they kill themselves as they attack is kind of harmful. And many things counter melee as well, like gravity generators or spider turrets. Just in general, how jank melee is right now, I wouldn't say use melee units at all. The Nano Swarms get a pass because of how fast they are.
Because of the sheer number of ships that are out there, I'm sure we're going to miss some of them, but one that occurs to me is the medic gunboat. I found them to be useful just because of their repair beam, giving you a little bit of healing sometimes.
Oh yeah, medic gunboats. Medic gunboats are also very nice if you cripple by accident. So like if you have like a crippled mobile factory and all the engineers somehow died, and you still have a few medic gunboats lying around, they're still very handy to have because they can heal you up. Their shortcoming is their lower range, so do be aware of that. They're not infinite like Sentinel gunboats.
No, they've got their limitations, but I think they're useful in that niche. Then on the melee side, I think some of the newer stuff is useful, like viral shredders and the vampire claws. Have you experienced the AI War 2 version of either of those?
Well, his viral shredders I find are pretty cool, but I think personally their DPS is a bit lacking. Even when they double, I don't think that their damage per second is as impressive. Like even a gang saw will out DPS them, I would think, from my experience at least. Their replication is nice, but it also contributes to counterattack really quickly if they get wiped out. Vampire claws, actually, I've never used vampire claws, so I cannot comment on how good or bad they are, honestly. They come with cloaking though, so if you need to get close to a target, well, there you go.
Just a couple more that I personally enjoy. This is not all Strikecraft, but you were just talking about types of stuff that you enjoy, and I'm a big fan of vampirism, which is why I tend to like things like the vampire claws. Then there's the Hagira arc with the shield and the vampirism, and that's one of my favorite super weapons for the same reason.
Rorqual Hergiria, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is actually surprisingly strong single target if the target has a shield left over. I've seen it deal upwards of like 250,000 damage to a single target, which is honestly insane. And the amount of energy or shield energy that regains is impressive. So Rorqual Hergiria is definitely one of those arcs I'd recommend picking up. But please be aware, again, force fields reduce your firepower.
It's also impossible to pronounce, which, I mean, that's another strike against it.
From Strikecraft to finally turrets, because you guys heard me rant about frigates, definitely Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is one of those turrets in the raid category which you can use to attack AI worlds. And again, if they die, they release construction bots, which continue the fight after the Blitzkrieg has died. And in some cases, construction bots are more deadly than the Blitzkrieg itself. Death Grip is another one of my favorite turrets. They are a new mechanic where if they shoot a tractored unit, they deal bonus damage. And Death Grips are useful for filtering out certain units. For example, they can filter out units that have a higher engine exponent or a higher albedo from other units. So Death Grips can deal with those units, while your other turrets deal with all the other units. Nucleophilics are very good against most heavy units because most heavy units have 7,500 energy or more. All Guardians have that, in fact, and Dire Guardians as well. And they're good against regular Strikecraft too because of just how high the damage is. Translocator turrets are very annoying for Strikecraft to deal with just because of how much it knocks them back. You can effectively keep the AI at bay for indefinite amounts of time, as long as they bring in anything with a heavy mass. Seeker missile turrets are another good turret because they deal more damage the higher the mass the target is. So they're good against Guardians, really good against Dire Guardians, exceptional against Golems. Bastille turrets. They're an ambush tech, which is unfortunate because I really like the Bastille turret. Unlike every other unit in the game, the Bastille is unique in that it actually gets bonus damage if it's under a force field. Its use is you put it under a force field, and as soon as something rushes the force field, surprise, it's just the blaster turret. It just deals high DPS, nothing special about it. Very good, and it syncs up with Generalist tech too, which I like. Just drop those wherever, because it doesn't matter what they hit, they'll be doing full damage. All the other turrets are great, don't get me wrong, but those are turrets I just recommend getting.
One more on the hot seat for you, AI types. And this one, well, normally you start off with Ensemble, and if you want to go crazy, you turn on the Adaptive and let it cycle between them once every hour. In terms of the other specialized types, however, which ones do you think are particularly interesting, or maybe they really make you change your strategy to adapt to what's going on with the AI?
There's nothing really in the easier category off the top of my head because, well, they're pretty easy and they're not interesting. Maybe Shield Hater because of how it just starts to obliterate your force fields. But other than that, moving on to moderate, one of the more challenging ones is the Fortress Baron. Reason being is recently they got a huge buff where you could see worlds with like a super fortress, and a bunch of mini fortresses, which are all painful to combat against at once. And there's no polycrystal hull to save us this time. It's basically like a turtle on steroids. Reconquestia is another interesting AI type that I like to fight. It always sends in the usurper with the wave, and it's always trying to take back whatever I take from it. Like sometimes, as soon as I destroy a planet, it'll immediately try to reconquest that planet. Quadratic is exactly as it sounds. Its waves double in power every time, at least minimum. How this works is basically the higher the AIP, the faster the waves charge, instead of the more stronger the waves get. Eventually, you'll be dealing with waves that are like 2k strength and then 4k. The highest I've had to deal with personally is, I think, 13k-ish roughly. Yeah, 13.6k, which was a nightmare, but that was the last wave for like the next 2 hours. And it gave me enough time to finish the AI homeworld off. Moving on to the harder section, one of the most difficult hard AIs, in my opinion, Special Forces Master. The waves are weaker, yes, but the Wardens and the Hunters, they're on steroids. The Wardens just show up everywhere, no matter where you go. The Hunters will show up as soon as you leave your planet or whenever you stop defending. And then as soon as you try to attack, boom, there the Wardens are in your face, trying to murder you. You're not going to die from the waves, you're going to die from the Hunter, if not counterattacks because of Warden. For the Brutal, I think Royal is one of the most notorious AIs in the game. It's probably considered the hardest because it replaces all its strikecraft, or at least almost all of them, with Guardians, and stronger Guardians too. Nuclear Turret is your best friend against this thing. The fact that they deploy Guardians instead of Strikecraft is certainly interesting because there's less variety, but more of it is just blunt force, if you know what I'm trying to say. It's not specialized, it's just there to hammer you in the face. Golemite is just kind of there because the Golemite is pretty much, if you destroy the Golems, then that's it. Show's over. Swarmer AI is very difficult, but it's more of a you'll know it's coming kind of thing. What's the right word to describe this? Basically, it's just you know that the AI is going to swarm you with a bunch of Swarmer units, and its guard post releases drones. That's all there is to it, really. And it doesn't change too much from the strategy. It's just keep fighting your way through the swarms of drones.
One thing with the Royal as well is that it seems to be particularly painful when you're trying to hack things. It's hard to hack on the higher difficulties, especially early in the game, and when you do it, you add in Royal spewing out all the high-level Guardians all over the place, it can take a really long time to get over that hump. Have you found that to be the case?
Oh yeah, I've found that quite often. Especially when it starts spawning in Royal Carrier Guardians, which are very painful to deal with because of those Guardians start creating more units to deal with, and it's just a never-ending loop of units spawn units kind of thing. And then there's the adaptive, which well cycles through that. Adaptive Annie I fought against once, and it almost cost me the game when it actually switched over to a Royal, and I started having to fight Royal Nucleos and Royal Pikes. But then it went right on back to a Turtle AI. So adaptive AI is very mixed bag. It's very schizophrenic, if that makes sense. You could be dying at one moment, and then suddenly the AI is just chilling. If you're looking for a very chaotic game without minor factions, adaptive is the way to go.
Definitely agree. I had an adaptive game recently and it keeps you on your toes, but it can also relieve the pressure on occasion. Well, thanks for joining me, Ethan. I really appreciate your perspective today. I hope we get a chance to do this again in the future.
Yeah, no probs. I'll be seeing you guys around.
So now that you've hopefully heard the entire interview with Ethan Wong, I'm curious if this is something you'd like to see more of in the future. Any other questions that perhaps he didn't answer that you might want him to come back and answer, feel free to throw those down in the comments. It was just an experimental sort of thing, but I'm hoping that you found his thoughts as interesting as I did.